Okay guys, so I'm going to go through and explain this practice test. Remember though, this isn't your only tool for studying. You also need to study the day 1, day 2, and day 3 homework. Those are the homeworks that you've had throughout this chapter. Those multiple choice will be great. So recomplete them, reprint out, or just look at the blank copies and redo them instead of just staring at the answers. So actually redo all of these problems, and I'll put blank copies of everything up online. All right, so number 1, the light reactions of photosynthesis supply the Calvin cycle with, okay, it's providing them with, guys, ATP and NADPH. And I'm going to scroll down here and show you why. So here's kind of a funky Calvin cycle. The whole point is that CO2 and a 5-carbon molecule combine together to make a 3-carbon molecule. Okay, it's actually 6 CO2s and 6 of these to make 12 of these. Okay. In order for this to be modified, in order to create sugar, which is your byproduct, right? You create 2 sugars. ATP needs to go in and NADPH needs to go in. So when ATP provides its energy, it then becomes ADP, uncharged adenosine triphosphate, right? ADP, because the phosphate group was broken, and then NADPH, becomes NADP plus because it lost the 2 high energy electrons and then also the hydrogen. Okay. Next question, which of the following sequences correctly represents the flow of electrons? If you notice, you start out with water. When water breaks, that provides the electrons to photosystem 2. So it goes from water in photosystem 2 to photosystem 1 and then to NADP plus, which becomes NADPH once it has the electrons. Then from there, guys, it goes off to then the Calvin cycle, where those electrons are used up to create sugar, which is the byproduct, right, the result of photosynthesis. So the answer is B. It goes from water to NADPH to the Calvin cycle. Number 3, which of the following does not occur during the Calvin cycle? All right, carbon is transformed into a 3-carbon molecule to make sugar. Yep, that happens, absolutely. And that requires the energy of ATP and NADPH. NADPH is transformed into NADP+, absolutely. When the electrons are lost, it then loses the hydrogen as well and becomes NADP+ all over again. And then it can be reused again to create NADPH. ATP is consumed to make ADP. Yes, when ATP loses a phosphate group, it becomes ADP. So the answer is C. Which of the following directly provides the energy needed for cell function? All right, what happens, guys, is that ATP, this is ATP right here, it's going to lose a phosphate group, okay? It loses that and becomes ADP, meaning 2 phosphates, rather than ATP, which means 3 phosphates, okay? So it's A. Where in the plant cells are the energy-absorbing molecules of photosynthesis located? Well, here's the issue. Your energy-absorbing molecules, which are called pigments, are found in photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. So basically what this question is asking is where are photosystem 1 and 2 located? And that's in the thylakoids, specifically the thylakoid membrane, but that's not an option, so the answer is B. 6. All of the following are part of ADP except what? So all of this is part of ADP, guys. The only difference between ATP and ADP is that you've got 3 phosphates in ATP. You need to break one of them off for ADP. So this does not exist in ADP. So D is your answer. In figure 8.1, what breaks in order to make ADP? Well, this bond right here. So that's the bond between C and D. Organisms such as blank that make their own food are called what? Okay, cacti are an example of autotrophs. Okay, plants gather the sun's energy with light-absorbing molecules called, those are pigments. Pigments are found in your photosystem. The stroma is the place that surrounds blank. So here's a picture of a chloroplast that I drew for you. Here's a granum, right, a stack of thylakoids. Here's your thylakoid membrane. Here's your thylakoid space. Okay, and so your stroma just surrounds these thylakoids. So the answer is A. Where do the light-dependent reactions take place? Light-dependent, right, are occurring in your thylakoid membrane. So the answer is C, on the thylakoids, right, in that membrane. That's where your electron transport chain is. The Calvin cycle takes place it's occurring in the stroma, right? So your NADPH and your ATP leave the thylakoids and go into the stroma in order to allow CO2 to be converted into sugar in this stroma. What are the products of the Calvin cycle? Glucose, right? That's the whole point of the Calvin cycle. During photosynthesis, the thylakoid space becomes what? Okay, it becomes rich with H plus charges, okay? And let's see, I'm trying to find where I drew this for you guys. I'm scrolling down, scrolling down, scrolling down. If you look here, if I'm rich in H pluses, I'm also rich in a positive charge, right? So this side is positively charged compared to this side. So not only do I have a lot of H's, but I also have a positive. So therefore, the answer for this is going to be D, both B and C, rich in H plus and positively charged. Which of the graphs reflects the effect of light intensity? The answer is A. So notice as you increase light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis is going to increase until a certain point, and then it's going to level off. Because photosynthesis, there's a maximum rate of photosynthesis. What happens during photosynthesis? Okay, heterotrophs have nothing to do with photosynthesis, so those are wrong answers. Autotrophs, what are they doing in photosynthesis? Well, they're making carbohydrates, they're making sugars. That's the whole point of photosynthesis, so the answer is D. Which structure in the figure represents a single thylakoid? Well, that would be C, that's one thylakoid right there. Which represents a granum? That a stack of thylakoids is called a granum. And what represents the stroma? Well, that's the liquid that surrounds the thylakoids. Which structure, oh, whoops, so that's 19. Then, guys, my numbers are off. I'm sorry. That should be 20 because I got rid of that question. Okay. Where are the photosystems 1 and 2 found? So if you notice, this is going to be your thylakoid membrane, right? This is a phospholipid bilayer. Your proteins, right, photosystem 2, photosystem 1 are proteins, and your protein pump are located, they're like intermixed with this phospholipid bilayer. Okay, so it's found in the thylakoid membrane. Chlorophyll reflects which color of light? It reflects green. That's why you see green. The flow of what particle across the thylakoid membrane powers the production of ATP? Okay, it has nothing to do with the electrons, right? Because the electrons go from photosystem 2 to photosystem 1 across the pump and then to NADP+. So it has nothing to do with electrons. It's just the pumping of hydrogens. So the answer is B. The oxygen released in photosynthesis originally came from water. And so I'm going to scroll down. I think I showed the breaking, maybe I didn't show the breaking of water here. Sorry if I'm making you guys dizzy. Where did I show breaking water? Breaking water, breaking water, breaking water. Breaking water, here. So there's the oxygen, that's where it's produced. When water is broken to get electrons for photosystem 2, right? So water provides electrons for photosystem 2. Photosystem 2 provides electrons for photosystem 1. The other products are hydrogens to create more of a gradient on this side, and then also oxygen. All right. Okay, in photosystem 2 of photosynthesis, from what does the photosystem steal an electron? In photosystem 2, from water. That's what we just talked about. The second part of photosynthesis uses ATP and high energy electrons from NADPH to convert carbon dioxide into what? It's being converted into sugars. I'm hoping this is getting repetitive at this point, guys. How is the H plus gradient produced in the thylakoid space? You got two different ways, okay? Hydrogens are pumped into the thylakoid space by that pump when electrons move across it. Also, when water is broken, okay, because it produces 4 H pluses for every O2, right? So the answer is D, both A and B. Which of the following products of the light reactions of photosynthesis are utilized in the Calvin cycle? NADPH and ATP. 29. Can plants keep stroma closed in the daytime, thus reducing loss of water? They can do this because and the answer is fix CO2 into organic acids during the night. So they keep the CO2 from going away by keeping them as organic acids, and then when daytime comes, they release the CO2 and normal photosynthesis occurs. Because normally photosynthesis occurs during the day, because you need sunlight, obviously, and so they have to open up their pores in order to get CO2, which then causes water to be lost. So that's what can plants do. They do it during the nighttime. C4 plants just collect less CO2, therefore they don't need their pores open as much. All right, free response. Explain the role of electron carriers in photosynthesis. So as soon as electrons become excited in photosystem 2 by sunlight, because the pigments have absorbed sunlight and therefore the electrons become excited, they are now reactive. And so the electron carriers carry them from one place to another to make sure that they don't cause any damage. And one example would be NADP+, which when it grabs two electrons becomes NADPH. 31. In what ways are photosystems 1 and 2 similar? Okay, both of them contain pigments and they both excite electrons. Photosystem 2 is the first one that does it, gets them really excited. Once the electrons pass over the pump, they lose energy, and therefore photosystem 1 is right after that in order to re-energize the electrons. Okay. Why is it important that a membrane separate the cellular regions on either side of the ATP synthase? The whole point of the way that the ATP synthase works is with a concentration gradient. So you need a high concentration of H plus on this side in order for passive facilitated diffusion, to work. So basically, this is high concentration here, this is low, and therefore the only way that the H pluses are going to move from high to low is if this is maintained. You need a high concentration here and a low here. When they move across, they cause the ATP synthase to rotate. If there weren't a concentration difference, guys, this wouldn't be powered, they wouldn't move in this direction, and therefore the ATP synthase wouldn't work. Describe the relationship between light-dependent and light-independent. So light-dependent produces not only O2, but also NADPH and ATP. Okay? And then what the light-independent reaction does is it takes NADPH and ATP and it produces high-energy sugar with that. It converts CO2 and the 5 carbon molecules into 3 carbon molecules, which are high-energy sugars. All right. In this experiment, guys, if you notice, this is a CO2 absorbent, meaning it's getting rid of all of the CO2. Well, in this one, the experimenter is going to be pumping in CO2. So what the student is changing is the amount of CO2 that the plant is being exposed to. So something that the student could be testing for is how CO2 affects the rate of photosynthesis. Now, the control variable would be that there is no CO2. Okay, because if the plant still grows with CO2, there's something else that's affecting it. So we want to make sure that nothing else is affecting the growth of our plant, the photosynthesis of our plant. Therefore, get rid of all the CO2. And if the plant doesn't grow, then we know that there's nothing else that can help it grow. We need the CO2 to create the sugar for the plant then to thrive. Okay. Predict what will happen if the student increases the amount of carbon dioxide. Well, if I keep putting in a ton of carbon dioxide, okay, there's only a certain rate, maximum rate of photosynthesis that can occur. Okay, so yeah, the rate of photosynthesis will increase, but I predict only to a certain point because they're limiting factors. So it's going to kind of level off. There's maximum rate because we don't have a ton of sunlight, we don't have a ton of water, so it's not like the rate of photosynthesis is just going to soar because, yeah, we have plenty of CO2, but we don't have plenty of energy, right, from the sun unless we put it directly in sunlight. We don't have plenty of water, so we'll run out of other resources even though we have plenty of CO2. All right, so these are just some things, like go through these again if you need to re-listen to my explanations, but these are just some concepts. I expect we're going to have a lab design on your test, so make sure that you're comfortable with being able to analyze things and really put it into terms and think about it, because that does take some thought. Okay, and that is your entire practice test. So make sure to go back, study the day 1, day 2, and day 3, which are posted online, and make sure you're comfortable with this and complete all of these all over again, and you should be completely ready.